everyone, looking for a drone that has prop protection, it has GPS, it's waterproof, it floats, it has top and bottom mount battery options? Well, the Hulk 3 Mini has all those features. There's one part of this that you might be interested in, even if you're not interested in the rest of the quad, and that is this CNC aluminum waterproofing housing for your 04. It incorporates everything you would need to mount an 04. You do have to decase the camera to get it in there, but as you can see, it just uses a standardized plug, so this may come in handy for other quads that has a two-finger mount to it, and it is just called the Darwin FPV 04 Pro CNC aluminum waterproof protective case. The ESC and the flight controllers do have interesting names: the F4 Cement waterproof flight controller and the Cement waterproof 60 amp ESC. See them right here. The motors are called Seawater 2006.5 2200 kV, and the props on those motors are Gemfan D90S tri-bladed props. The recommended battery is a 6S 1300, which you can buy with the quad directly from Darwin FPV. But I do micros, and these are the largest 6S batteries I have, so that's what I tested. The GPS module under here is the Darwin FPV M1018 GPS. I removed the flotation device. You can see where you could top mount the battery if you wanted to. There's a battery pad right there. With the main feature of this that separates it from other quads is the flotation and the waterproof. I flew it with the flotation device in all the time. But for good measure, there's the battery pad on the bottom. 3D print back here for various antenna connections. The mount that you use for your 04 is also what they'll use for an analog camera. Would it be right in here? And then if you're running an analog camera, you could use an external HD camera. So just a 6S 1050 weighs 180 grams. So this is all going to be way over 250 grams. So I'm going to skip all the weights because my scale doesn't even go high enough. Carbon fiber is 3.5 millimeters thick, and motor post to motor post, I'm getting a little over 151 millimeters. It does come with two flotation devices. You might call this a pool noodle. You use this piece on the bottom strapping just to kind of help the quad stay flat when you have a battery mounted down there, but I didn't use it. We got various pieces of foam. We have an extra USB-C plug. You'll notice on the flight controller I had one in there, and some zip ties. You would put the foam around here for a little extra protection, but unless you're flying inside, I don't think that's necessary. We've got several small packages of thermal paste, which I think you probably use that on either the flight controller or the ESC. We've also got a screw kit in here, some heat shrink, a couple other random screws that I probably put in there, and a wrench. Don't know if it's standard, but it did come with a little screwdriver kit. Kind of cute. Came with this card, this card, this card, this brochure, and one sheet of stickers. We're going to start off with what I would consider probably ideal for this style or design of quad. You know, prop protection, cinematic sort of filming, get your shots safe, and it has prop protection. So the winds in this particular case are only 5 to 7 miles an hour, and quite honestly, couldn't hardly feel it. So 5 to 7 miles an hour might be up above the tree line or up above the house, which we do fly in this particular view. If you're not used to my videos, well, subscribe so you can come back again. But what I'll be doing during the course of the flight samples, because this does fly for anywhere from 5.5 to 6.5 minutes, or actually 6 minutes and 50 seconds, is we're only going to do samples of the various flights that I've got to show you, and we transitioned, as we already have, from the goggle view over to the gyro stabilized or the rock steady view of the 04. And then we'll transition back after about a minute and a half of rock steady or gyro stabilized view back to the DVR view. I do that because the DVR view does not have any stabilization, so you get a good idea of how smooth the quad is without the stabilization, and then you can incorporate the stabilization, whether it's the Rocksteady that comes with the 04 or something software-wise outside of the 04 that you might have experience with or want to use for your purposes. It does feel like this quad is a very specialized niche sort of quad. You know, it's going to be up there in weight, so the 250 grams limit and other limits that we have throughout the globe might not be friendly to this one, but I think if you're doing professional filming, maybe, but I don't know if you're doing professional filming if you would be using an 04 or if you would be using something else. I thought, especially for movies and bigger productions, they were using much larger cameras, you know, $10,000-$20,000 cameras, but I don't really get into that arena at all. So many of you out there would probably know whether this particular quad would even be of use, or if this is just those of you that like to use the 04 to get your shots. Maybe there are markets to sell the footage, like there used to be for a photo back in the day, that you can go to a place, a beach, a cliff, or something like that, and then you need something that floats, so if you do go down in the water, that it does come back up to the surface so you can fish it out with, you know, the help of a boat or something like that. And as I already showed you, you know, we have a pool, so I dunked it in the pool a bunch of times. I think I showed you 6 times. And granted, I think I could have done a better job. I did not think of that until I'd put together all my footage here, that I should have just disarmed, because I'm getting a little bit of that air mode bounce off the pool, because I did have air mode on. So I should have just disarmed to just kind of dunk it and then take off from there. My apologies. I should have thought of that before I'd gotten to this stage where I'm actually putting the video together. I am actually re-recording most of the narration because of that thought occurred to me after I put most of this together. But we've seen several minutes. Let's move on to a less than ideal condition for this particular quad that is going to be in 9 to 20 mile an hour winds. Still flying slow, not at the max camera angle yet. We will get to the max camera angle, and then if you're wondering about the max camera angle, we'll cover that kind of first when we go back to the desk. You are limited to how much camera angle you can get. I think there are some things that you can kind of work around to get a little bit more than what I show in the next flight, but it's going to depend on your comfort level with doing those things. So again, this is the DVR footage. You can see we've got satellites up there, where I don't think in the first sample we had satellites. It does not get satellites fast, and several of you have talked about how some GPSs do not get satellites fast, and especially like the first flight of the day, they can take a little bit longer. I don't have a ton of experience with GPS, but I can tell you, having another quad that I've recently started flying that does have GPS, this one does not get GPS as fast as the one that will be coming up on the channel. So oddly enough, we're bouncing between 4 and 0 there on the satellites. It's kind of a fun thing. It did have the speed, which generally is 12 to 13 kilometers per hour. I am flying a little bit faster. That's not necessarily intended. It's just kind of my natural sort of flight progression, is I'm always trying to kind of push the nose down and fly a little bit faster. My true, faster, more aerobatic, freestyle-ish sort of flight will be coming up in the next segment. 80 degrees, by the way. So we're still here in mid-October, having relatively nice days. You can see the grass is still green, although a lot of leaves have fallen. So we're going to see a lot more leaves on the grass. I think this flight happens to be shortly after our lawn service came and cut the grass, so we don't have too many leaves, but even the pool itself has a lot more, or the cover has a lot more leaves. But at this point, I'm just kind of flying around and trying to get up in this wind a little bit so you can get a better idea. Even though the tree leaves aren't moving around a lot, we have gusts, and you may be able to hear that in my flight audio that come up, and then you'll be able to discern how this is handling the wind. I thought myself, it's a big, heavy quad. It's going to handle the wind to a certain degree pretty well. It's still prop protected, so it's got those surfaces that the wind can press against and cause some dirty air through your motors, but I don't think in this case it's gonna have to be windier, or in a specific flight situation where the wind is kind of directionally hitting the quad to cause much of an issue at even, say, 20 miles an hour. Let's move on to my traditional, more faster. Oh, we're getting up to 16 and 17 kilometers per hour, but let's move on to my faster flight. This is max camera angle. Again, we'll cover this when we get back to the desk. This is a different day. I don't think we're going to see any satellites during this flight. Most of my flights during my faster day of flying this were relatively short. I'm doing the 850 in this particular case. Oh, that reminds me, cinematic or slower sorts of flight times. I should report on the 1050s. I got around 6 minutes and 50 seconds, so you could probably get that close to 7 minutes. My 6S batteries are not fresh, but I don't fly much 6S, so they haven't been heavily used either. On the 850 slow cinematic flying, about 5 minutes and 20 seconds. And again, I don't have larger 6S batteries to test. The recommended battery is a 1300 milliamp battery, and I just don't have any of those. I do micros if you're not familiar with, usually this is about as big as I get, especially when it comes to the battery size. I rarely use 6S batteries. There was a short time where we had a few 2.5 to 3 inchers that use 6S, and that's why I have 6S batteries. But, you know, bigger cinematic sort of 6S batteries, I just don't have. But as far as the freestyle-ish sort of flight, it kind of flew like you expected. It really, I think most people, if you wanted to fly it this way, you're going to be doing more straight line stuff, whereas in my backyard, you're going to be doing a lot of weaving. But it's still very manageable, obviously. Even though it is kind of a heavy quad, it slides in those hard turning moments, so you just have to counter that with more angle on your embankment of turn, as well as more pitch and more yaw. Whoa. As you know, you just try to hold your line and carry that weight. Again, I am flying this in all these flights with the, as I've been calling it, the flotation device, the foam noodle in the back. So I'm bottom-mounted battery in all these flights as well. I did that intentionally because I felt like that was the most likely scenario somebody would be looking at this quad, is that you need that flotation in there. Otherwise, you probably would look at something that's not prop protection and not necessarily waterproof. And that takes a big part of its feature set and separates it out from the rest of the quads that might be available for filming sorts of purposes. This is fairly unique, as I said before. So I think it'll be fairly specific to those of you that need not just one of those features, but probably all those features. The full flight here, I think I said it. Hopefully I said it. I don't script these things, if you can't tell. This is on the 850, the full send 850 6S battery. I did not fly faster on the 1050s. I tend to stay a little bit lighter when it comes to my more aggressive flight, especially flying in my backyard, which... if I haven't mentioned it before and you haven't seen it on the channel, the back fence line is 251 feet. And I'm not sure the distance on the front side of the backyard fence line. But I would say it's probably 70 or 65% of that distance. So 200, maybe 190 feet. To give you some idea of the space. And of course we've got trees, and we've got the outdoor living space and stuff like that out there that I'm working around. And going with the bigger battery just makes it a little bit more risky as far as me hitting something and damaging it. Say I bonk off the pergola and I go through that window that's right in our kitchen area. I don't know how I missed that little decorative item as I swung in there.
How'd I miss that thing?
But that's the end of the flight. You can see I went 3 minutes and 35 seconds. A little bit long on the battery though. Okay, so as I said, we're going to start with the camera angle and this waterproof mount. You can see where the screw hits the carbon fiber right there. Now, you can pry the carbon fiber apart, as you might be able to see here, probably only on one side. And then you could shove it back a little bit more, like I did there. And then you hit the rear post back here. So even where I was at, let me see if I can get this to just go right there. Well, dang it. I was hoping to just move it right there. That was the camera angle I was flying at. And then the max, if I spread this apart, is right there. So that is, unless you start to remove parts of this quad, that's the max angle. But a couple of things I wanted to point out that I thought were fairly interesting about this particular setup. So the USB-C is available without taking out your mount screw. You can actually get to it, and there's a little tiny finger hole, if I can get the light on here, that they've cut into there to where you can pop this out after you get the screws out. And you can get USB-C access across. Of course, on the other side, we have our bind button, which does line up if you mount it correctly. It does line up. If you do this waterproofing stuff, something else to be careful, a mistake I made, it has two of these really small rings, and they go apart. Up in the front part, there's a little groove or track. Like if you work on cars, you know, they cut a groove that says, hey, you know, your gasket goes here. That's what this is. And unfortunately, when I was putting my two halves together, because it's very tightly manufactured, that, you know, if you go in at an angle in any way of getting the two halves together, it just won't go together. It's got very low tolerances. And unfortunately, this has a habit of coming out of the track, and I did not see that. So when I pushed it together, I ended up cutting one of these. Thankfully, it did come with a spare. So the spare is what I used after that. I had to even, you know, fired it up to make sure it worked at that point. and I'd already broken one of these. So if you do go with this mount or this quad, something to be especially aware of is that this little guy tends to snake out. Then if you meet any resistance, make sure he's laying in his track. We pointed out a lot of other things just going through the quick specs. Of course, I'm trying to figure out a way to show this. You can see down through the bottom there for our O4 connection, it comes all the way through the bottom. Maybe I can show it this way, coming off the flight controller all the way up through this hole, and then they use the slots for the analog camera up through there, and then you come around the outside and plug it in right through there. Oh, something else about this waterproof case. So initially, when I went outside and I was just doing my dry flying, I noticed some condensation on the front of the lens. It's cold in the basement. We still have our air conditioner on, and then it was probably fairly warm on one of those days. Not anything of the flight footage I showed you. It was only 80 and 82 degrees on those particular days, but we did have some upper 80s. But I noticed some condensation across the front of the lens, and of course that alerted me to the fact that my lens was not on tight. I did not check that, so that was something else that I needed to go back and do. I cleaned the lens and I kind of let it sit open for a day or two, and then when I got ready to fly it again, I gave this some good turns. This does not affect your focus. You could, do ND filters, but because I had condensation on the front side of this, I wanted to make sure that I did not get, water didn't go in when I was dunking it in the pool that way. Another point that I forgot to mention about these is you want to get these. There's a rubber piece that sits on top, and you have to fish your antennas through the wire down through. It's all part of the mounting. They really need to have a build video for this, and I thought about doing one, but I'm not an expert. I was just doing it once. But after you get it all set, you've got to screw these down, and I went after this fairly aggressively, again, because we're waterproofing, not water resistant, waterproofing all of this stuff. So I wanted to make sure it was all tight, so turn your screws, make sure they're snug, snug, snug. These are not slots. The holes that these screws sit in, they are just the hole. So you have to get both ends seated all the way or the screw won't go in, which is a good thing. I did not measure this carbon. Let me get my calipers. So the upright carbon fiber looks like it's 2 millimeters thick, and it looks like we're almost 43 millimeters wide, but there's a little flex to that, so I would call it 42 millimeters for your top mounted battery. I keep having to go back, but this ships if you get this separately or if you buy this. Well, I think this will just come in this bag. It comes in one of these velvet bags. I think it will always come like that, but this is how I received this particular part. It came in this bag. Of course, if you don't need the flotation side or the prop protection side, Darwin FPV does have another quad. I think it's just called the Hulk, and I think it's the Hulk 2. I don't think they're up to version 3 on the Hulk. That is also waterproof. That you could also run this CNC aluminum mount for your O4. On top of that, they'll have an analog version. I think I tested the analog version a few years back. But, different feature sets when it comes to the flotation, if you go down in water, and having prop protection as well. Those are 2 quads, and they are covered. My typical sorts of around the horn here on things, they do use some of my favorite motor wire tape to keep the motor wires up nice snug to the carbon fiber, so you don't have to worry about that getting down to the prop and causing you problems. As far as mounting the prop protection to the carbon fiber, they're using what has some knurling on it, standoffs, metal standoffs, probably aluminum. There is a capacitor right down in there. If I can show that, there's a pretty sizable capacitor. I can't read the voltage on that though. There were no extra battery straps, so if you break one, you're gonna have to come up with one. These are going to be the larger sort because 6S. I did notice, if you can see right here by my finger, whereas this would be, I think this is your S bus or your O4. That is not connected in this particular case. I would hope that if you ordered the plug and fly version, that it would come with that wire connected to your O4, so you could use your O4 compatible remote and the RC link that is built into the O4 to fly this as well. But I can't verify that because I've only got the one. That would be a good question to send to support. That is the Darwin FPV Hulk 3 Mini. And the last thing that I have to kind of mention here is there might be a typo on the website. I will message them before I put this video out, but when you get the entire quad with an O4 directly from Darwin FPV, the price that they have on there is almost $1,000 USD. But without the 04, it's like $477. So the 04 plus them putting it in the mount is $500? Surely not. Surely not. But that is the Hulk 3 Mini from Darwin FPV, a waterproof GPS prop protection 6S floating drone with an 04 or analog if you choose to go that route, or if you're interested at all. There'll be a link down in the video description. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comment section below. I appreciate your time. And thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. I bet you people are annoyed with hearing that. I'm kind of annoyed.